Hi guys, how's it going?
Good. How you doing? You are up first, Gavin, today. Just so you
I know, lucky me.
Yes. Hi. Morning, everyone, or afternoon, or evening, wherever anyone is calling. You're all coming in. One, two, three, four.
Over in the UK, we've got a sitcom called Gavin and Stacey. So I'm hoping the fact that we're first up, Stacey, is I hope that's good news. I hope that augurs well for us. We've already got our own show. What can go wrong?
That's great. Hey, Jay, how's it going? Morning.
Hey everyone.
Good to see you, Jay. We do pretty much have everyone in here.
Great.
People will be joining in a couple minutes, but this is a little different. This is 10 minutes each per person. I will be moderating. I'm Sean. If anyone has any questions in the middle of the sessions, just private message me in the chat. But we have 10 wonderful writers here for the Manager series to talk to the wonderful Jay. Jay's amazing. So Jay, why don't you go ahead and get started? Introduce yourself, who you are, what you read, what you like, all that good stuff.
Cool. Hi everyone. I'm Jay Glazer. I see a few familiar faces. Looking forward to talking with everyone today. I am a manager and I work with a pretty wide spectrum of people from writers, TV, film, directors, and then actors as well. So it's definitely a wide variety, and part of the fun for me is getting to do a million different types of things and work with all sorts of different people. I think more than anything else, I'm just attracted to storytelling that I can connect with. It feels like it has something to say about what's going on today. I think that film and TV and theater, the arts in general, are such important ways to not just entertain ourselves, but have discussions about what's going on today and where we're going. And just thinking about myself growing up, and even sometimes today, I think stories can have such an incredible impact on us. It can even be more persuasive than something you could read on the news or hear on the news or read in an article. So yeah, I really like stories that challenge us and have something to say. And we got a really wide variety, of course, of projects from you all. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone. And I always like to preface by saying, obviously, taste is all of our own. I do my best to have an opinion. It's obviously part of my job, but I think more than else, try to give practical advice, and I spend my time trying to figure out what is going to work and what people want and how to strategize with projects. So I will do my best to try to give, if we can squeeze it in, as much practical feedback as I can. So yeah, any questions that you have, feel free to try to jam it in if we can. And let's get rolling.
Cool. Yeah, you guys are definitely in for a treat with Jay. And Jay's you're in for a treat with these writers too.
Awesome.
So
I should just quickly add, if you see me glancing off screen, I have some notes on another monitor, so I promise I'm paying attention.
Cool. Good. And then just for my sake, you get 10 minutes per person. I will give a 2-minute verbal warning, and then my face will pop up around 30 seconds left just to tell you to wrap it up. If you're not talking to Jay, just keep yourself off screen and on mute. So the writer has his full attention. But let's go ahead and get started. We have Gavin up first. So Gavin.
Hey, hi Jay.
Gavin, how you doing?
I'm good. I feel slightly like I'm the warm-up man here.
Well, thankfully, you seem like you have a talk show going on in the background. You're set.
You've interrupted me on a very busy show tonight. This is the set from Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, and I for some reason I prefer it to my own house, and so it just seems to work.
Great.
But there you go. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. I'm really grateful. My situation is I'm a full-time writer in the UK. I've written things that have been put on stage, made for radio. I've done VR stuff. I've written console games. I've written an interactive episode of Doctor Who called The Lonely Assassins, which went out earlier this year, which starred Jodie Whittaker and a few of Ingrid Oliver. So I'm kind of getting there, and I'm kind of doing stuff. I'm writing TV for Free at Last TV, who produce, I don't know if you've heard of them, they're in the UK, they produce stuff like Agatha Raisin, and I'm writing episodes for them. So anything you can help me, and I'll just go ahead and shall I talk about Moriarty for a bit?
Yeah, that sounds great. I guess before you jump in, I would just quickly ask, like, what is your goal? I mean, the UK market pretty different than the US. So are you looking for insight into how to develop a project here or in the UK?
Two words, Jay: world domination. And that means starting with the States. Now, I'd like to do stuff in the States. I've got friends who've written over there who are based in the UK, who've gone over there, and they've had a blast. People tell you can't do that if you're a UK writer. I know people that have done that, and so yeah. I would love to do that. And the stories that I enjoy telling are ones that are hopefully universal anyway. So that's the end goal. That's the end game that I'm looking for.
Cool. Well, I thought this was an interesting and commercial idea. So by all means, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, basically, just so everyone knows, my idea is called Moriarty. It's set in the world of Sherlock Holmes. It's a contemporary thriller. So it is set in the 2020s. And the notion is that when Sherlock Holmes and Professor Moriarty fought by the Reichenbach Falls, in canon, what Arthur Conan Doyle had happened was, obviously, Moriarty died, Sherlock Holmes went away and returned several years later. Now, I've, for many, many years, given talks and written about Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty and that whole canon. And it always fascinated me, what would have happened if Moriarty had survived and Holmes had died? And it's a very simple premise, but when you start following that lead, following that thread, it takes you to Dr. John Watson. What would his thoughts of Moriarty be? And what if Moriarty needed Watson? And so these two very unlikely figures are thrown together. And if you add into the mix Watson's wife, Mary, a really interesting figure. And so you've got this fantastic trio at the heart of this drama. And so moving forward, you're entering the world of Sherlock Holmes, who is, I should say, commercially very attractive. There's a legacy there that we would hopefully respect, but also give it a fresh twist. And so what the audience will be carried along with is, as I say, this amazing pairing of Moriarty and Watson, and you get a lot of the iconography of Holmes in terms of Baker Street, the macabre elements, Lestrade, obviously Moriarty himself. And you would get these guys solving a mystery, but also Moriarty trying to find out who took over his criminal empire. And you've got a B plot of what's happened to Watson since then. And so he's become, as in the books, a detective himself, but also a security analyst. And so hopefully it's the kind of film, it's a safe film. It's the kind of film that you look at and think, yeah, I do want to see that. I like Sherlock Holmes, I like Moriarty. Moriarty's the bad guy, and we can have fun with that.
I think that, yes, the Sherlock Holmes character and mythology, people still like. We just saw the Enola Holmes film with Millie Bobby Brown, and I think people are like pretty down to retell and kind of rejigger some of these characters to give it some new life. So I think I have two main questions or pieces of feedback or kind of ideas. I think one, I like that it's contemporary. I think that is a really good idea that could, period just feels always so challenging. And so yanking it to contemporary seems like a great way to kind of have the best of both worlds, like the mythology and not forcing people to watch period stuff, which is often challenging. I think it would be just in the way Enola Holmes put a young female character at the front of it. And since we're already, playing around and switching things, I think it might be interesting is it so crazy to say maybe one of these lead characters could be a female?
Yeah, I mean, I thought for Moriarty, someone along the lines of Renee Jean Page, someone who is, let's say, sexy as hell, who you're drawn to him. There's a aliveness about him. So if you have him as that, and then Watson, a complete opposite to that, I say maybe female, or maybe an old army man, which he is in the books. And so you've got this. And then Mary, who in the books has got an Indian connection. If we bring that through, so someone like Gemma Chan or Constance Wu, someone of that background. And so even visually, you're looking at something which is very modern. And I think putting Moriarty, if I go on too much, just shut me down, because I do bang on about this.
No, it's cool. I just wanted to address one other point. I think the biggest question for me that obviously I was going to say we could only know by reading the script, but maybe you can speak to it a little bit. I think that the other huge question is tone. There's such a spectrum. This could be Kingsman, where it's really postmodern and jokey and has that distinct humor, or you could do it in an incredibly grounded way, which I don't think is the right answer. So I'm curious, like the execution is, especially because it's a double-edged sword. It's amazing to use the Sherlock Holmes iconography. There's also probably many other Sherlock Holmes scripts banging around out there that have all sorts of different takes. So the execution, I think, has to be spectacular, of course. So I'm curious, what the tone you have done it in is.
Yeah, I mean, the tone I've gone for is it hopefully it reels you in with wit and humor, and to an extent you're thinking, okay, as you say, something like Kingsman, and that's something which the Sherlock Holmes oeuvre has done right since the Basil Rathbone days. But also after bringing you into this world, you found we're dealing with more serious issues than you might imagine. And so I'm really keen, and was really keen when writing this, to say in the old days, your sympathies would have been with Holmes and not at all with Moriarty. But things are a lot grayer these days. And these days, I think we've got a mistrust of officialdom and the guy at the top. And Moriarty has always been against that. And so for someone like Watson, who is such a stickler, and who is such a, as I say, so stuck up, you can get more stuck up if you've got a broom down your back. For him to have his eyes opened by Moriarty to say, oh no, the guys you're protecting, the guys that you're a security analyst for, this is how they made their money. And so we enter a world which, as I said in the pitch, behind every headline, behind every hashtag, there's a falsity behind that, there's a truth. And that's what Moriarty is after. And that's what hopefully will interest the audience.
2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. But in terms of the tone of the content, like, is
Right.
this something that would be like, to put it in a basic way, what would be like the target audience or the rating that you like? Is it, could the whole family watch it, or are we pushing the boundaries of not just language but like morality and so forth?
I think possibly pushing the boundaries of morality. I would look at it as maybe kids might go to it because it's big and there are some set pieces in there. And to an extent, it is a popcorn and Pepsi movie, and there is that commercial element. But there's also a kind of gritty underside to it as well. And so hopefully, it's not straddling those; it's combining them. Does that make sense?
I think that it partially does. I'm thinking of comps like the recent Sherlock Holmes films from Guy Ritchie.
Yeah.
Or like, I think conventional, like, you know, Kingsman is a super raunchy film. I think that conventional wisdom would say, don't do that because it could limit your audience. But obviously the films were brilliant, and now it's like its own franchise. So it goes to show you can't just follow every common wisdom rule.
What would your instinct be as to what tone you suggest I would go for?
I think my instinct would be to try to find a middle ground where it does not need to be R, which I think could be pretty limiting.
Yeah.
But isn't a overly simplistic, safe, boring movie. So I think that you can. I think PG-13 feels like the right answer to me, and I'd have to look it up, but I bet that's what the Guy Ritchie films are.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think my final thought, I think we're about to run out of time, is that this is a big movie, and so I don't think you need to shy away from that. I think it just means that in terms of, like, you know, your development, I think definitely you're going to need like a studio level producer, and like I think that there are probably somewhat usual suspects of what producers might be a great fit for that, and I bet it's a relatively like narrow field, but sometimes you have an indie producer and they bring on the bigger producer. But I think that's the best pipeline into studio stuff, and I think a project like this also potentially lends itself to, you know, UK American co-production because there's a global appeal to it, but it's also British. So yeah, I think those are my thoughts. Any questions before we run out of time?
No, I mean, apart from the very obvious one, what would you think? What would you suggest my next step is at this point?
I think that the script needs. I think that there's a high bar for the script due to the scale. I think it's got to be exceptional. Hopefully, it is. So if it's in that shave, then I think the answer is getting it to a producer first and foremost who has a pathway towards development that's going to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Cool idea.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Gavin.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right. Cool. Let's keep it moving. Up next, we have Stacy.
Hello.
Hey, Stacy.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I am a writer, director with an indie film background. I've made a feature and some shorts. And recently I've been writing television pilots, and originally from Chicago suburbs.
Cool.
And now I'm in LA suburbs again. My project is Black in Paris, and it is based off experiences that I had when I lived in Paris for a while. I was in grad school, and I was stressed out, and I was living in the valley, and it was hot, and I just declared I'm moving to Paris, and everyone thought I was crazy. Black people don't do that, but I did it, and then I realized that there were a lot of Black people who did that, and I met a lot of Black people there, not only Americans, expats, but also British, African, West Indian, all kinds of people, and there was this whole community of people that I was a part of. A lot of artists, a lot of filmmakers. And so my series is kind of in that world. And it follows Rose House. It's a 1-hour drama. Follows Rose House, who's like an uptight woman who's followed everything her mother wanted for her, and kind of put her own dreams of being a dancer behind her. And she's also now a caregiver for her mother, and everything is on her because the rest of the family is unreliable. And she gets stressed out, and she just one day decides, I'm going to Paris. She leaves. She's always dreamed of going to Paris. And like me, she meets these artists, these Black people who kind of take her in, convince her that she can also do that. So she kind of blows up her life back home. She quits her job in education. She tells her family to figure it out on their own. She's staying in Paris to become a dancer, and she hangs out with the Squad, which is this group of eclectic, artsy people, which includes Monk, a jazz musician. They have a romance, but he has a secret girlfriend that she doesn't know about at first. And Lorraine, who's a biracial Black French woman, who's a photographer and filmmaker who dreams of going to the US. And Tex, who's a queer choreographer who owns his own dance studio. But his ex-husband's trying to shut it down. And then Star, who's the ringleader, who's an all-around performer, much like one of my best friends that I met there, who every night she's on a different stage doing a different thing. She's a singer, dancer, actor, model. And so she becomes a part of this community, but realizes that they are just as complicated and stressful as the family she left back home. And that's basically what the series is about, this group of people who support each other, but also drive each other crazy.
Well, I really love this idea. It felt like a really specific and interesting world, and both cultural and like cross-cultural intersection. I saw this film a year or two ago on Netflix called Uncorked. That was about a sommelier who have you seen it? And
Yes.
It was such an interesting story. Like, you know, I think we all, like, just like you, romanticize Paris in this way. And there's so many movies that we see that explain it to us in this idealized way. And it's so interesting to, like, through the lead protagonist, get like a look into not just this place, but a community that a lot of people don't know as well that it's there.
Right.
Of course, like the obvious comparison in the title alone, Emily in Paris, which is a show that I watched a tiny bit of, and it wasn't really for me.
Right.
But that's kind of like the more maybe traditional take on, you know, young single woman in Paris, and maybe it's not
Yes.
very as interesting. I think my two of my central questions, and obviously only so much information is going to be in one page, but is about, like, number one, story engine, and number two, how much of the focus of the story is going to be in the world of dance, and how much performance might we see on screen?
The story engine is pretty much about the relationship between Rose and Star, and the frenemy. So they start out as friends, and it's about the group all together. The Star sees them as a family, and she's the leader of the family. And when Rose comes in, she's like a disruptor. They start to break apart, and then she's trying to keep them together. And it's all about the drama that comes with that. And I think performance, it's like dance is part of it, but there's also art, and there's photography and film. Like it's all in the art world, so there is music and dance, but it's really about the conflict between the characters and the relationships between the characters.
I think I worry a little bit that
Mm.
because this is a 1 hour drama and not a show like Friends, where it's just a bunch of friends hanging out, not really doing anything, and
Mhm.
kind of resetting at the end of every episode. I mean, yes, there are bigger story arcs. So this relationship between Rose and Star, you're saying is like a central story engine, but I think I wonder if, like, I think it's tough for every episode to be specifically about their, like,
Okay.
what's the story that is primarily driving forward that forces their conflict in their relationship?
I think it's Rose's desire to be successful as a dancer and kind of prove to her family back home that she can make this work. And so it is kind of following Rose on this journey, and how Star is kind of the antagonist to that journey.
So like the process of her developing this career and her craft is a prominent storyline that is going, stuff will happen
Right.
week after week.
Yes.
Okay.
And then all the other, it's an ensemble as well. Like she's our lead, but the other characters also have their own struggles and issues throughout the story. Yeah.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Well, if you'd like, I had a couple quick thoughts to maybe kick around about development.
Okay.
I think that there are probably a lot of potential buyers for a show like this. I think that the market is, of course, super hungry for diverse stories and unique perspectives and stories that are personal. And I think you've got a great take on why you're the storyteller and so forth. I think beyond a producer, of course, I think that there's potentially a really cool opportunity to work with a great showrunner. Wouldn't it be interesting to make hook up with someone who is French or maybe has some other different perspective to even make it even more authentic and to bring some other perspective to it. So I think that in terms of the execution of the script, obviously that's quite important. But I think you have a high concept idea that is something I haven't seen before.
Now, when you say like a French showrunner, are you saying someone here in the US that's French that's working in television, or are you talking about someone in French television that's running a show there?
I
Or
think
both,
that
either.
because the show is essentially American, hopefully you could show it. And I think it's because it's a fish out of water. It's about an American woman. I think it's primarily an American show. So to be honest, I'd have to do my homework. I don't know if there are 100 well-known French or French-American showrunners. Probably not. But I do know that the French market is expanding and growing. Everyone, of course, loves that show, Call My Agent. So there could be a cool opportunity to tap into some of the cross-cultural developments in that
Right.
in that regard.
Yeah, and for television, is there like co-productions for television?
I can't say in all honesty that I have a ton of experience specifically with the French market. I think the answer is anything's possible. Yes, it's possible. I think it's not easy. It's not as there's obviously a language barrier, number one, which makes it very different than the UK market, wherein there are a lot of co-productions. And I think the co-productions with France that I do know about, I think are more European. It's other Europe. So I don't know. I don't know how many. I think that there are probably a limited number of American-French co-productions. I'm sure there are some. In TV,
Yeah.
I don't know, candidly.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great idea.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. And cool. Up next, we have Heather. You're muted, Heather. There you are.
Hi, Jay.
Heather, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great.
Good. I will jump right in.
Awesome.
So a little backstory as to what drew me to my idea is that I used to work in this major corporation that has a huge network. And so I had a boss that decided that every time I would call in sick, he would show up at my apartment to make sure I was actually sick. He was a very strange boss. So I finally got tired of that, went to HR, said like, this is weird. I'm not quite sure how to like deal with this. And it was like I hit a bee's nest of people enraged at me, mad at me, and all of a sudden I was the enemy. And they
Can I ask, just out of curiosity, did he look up your address in employee files?
Yeah, I mean, he just it was like a strange, like, yeah, he was a strange character.
You didn't give him your address and say, drop off a folder of my work.
No.
Yeah.
No, yeah, he was super OCD and controlling and like it was a weird situation. What that was weird enough, but he became the least of my problems because for some reason this big corporation decided that I was the enemy, and I was shocked at how everyone from friends that were my art directors and PAs and all that were like really chipping away at my work skills anyways, to try and bring me down. So that's what brought me to, so I wanted to create kind of a harassment workplace dynamic setup show that expands out into something even more, is because I could quit, so that's not very interesting. But if you're in the military, you cannot quit. So I blended the two ideas of how a woman deals with harassment in the military, because the women are told, and people are told, if they're harassed in the military, really your only option is going AWOL or committing suicide. You cannot get out.
I have heard the news reports that are so incredibly shocking about the occurrence of sexual assault and the lack of accountability. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty much just either keep your mouth shut or you're putting yourself into a very dangerous situation. So I created the show entitled Endurance. And it's kind of like there's a show in England called Strike Back. And it's a combination of Strike Back and Homeland. And it's when a high-end female special ops soldier is sexually assaulted by her commanding officer. She is forced to navigate a corrupt system enabling him and a suicide mission he has decided to send her on to rescue an American hostage captured in the Triangle of Death, with the actual hopes of her being killed. She must succeed and survive her missions while also trying to expose the corrupt and deadly ways. So she's this woman that we open on her on a mission in the morning with her partner, and it goes terribly wrong. He gets injured and she gets back to base, and the CO is really giving her a hard time. And this is the time that she finally just can't take it anymore. She snaps back at him verbally in front of everybody, humiliates him. And when she's in the shower that night, he comes out of enrage and assaults her. And from that moment on, the next morning she's going to go report it. But right away, she's pulled into a meeting where she's told that she's been actually pulled from her regular duties and is going to be sent on this mission over into Turkey, where they have this American hostage, which usually military, they kind of don't get intervene with American hostage aid workers. But he has decided that they need to send her and her team into this super dangerous situation to rescue someone that they normally don't even rescue. And she has to survive this mission. And at the last minute, there's a change, and actually he's going to go on the mission with her. So throughout the pilot, we see her navigating this mission and trying to succeed. And we don't know exactly if he is there to help or if he is there to harm her even further. So the series really deals with her surviving that mission, but then realizing her life is really on the line, because now the entire network is kind of enabling him to kind of chase and hunt her down. And not everybody's a bad guy. She has an entire team of soldiers around her that actually kind of see what he's doing, and that the dynamic is so dangerous and toxic, which actually they don't like either, because it puts all of them in danger. It's such a distraction when you're on a mission that this kind of toxic environment is happening without clear thinking. So, and as the series progresses, she also starts to learn about other soldiers, men and women, that are kind of dealing with these situations as well. So they are kind of growing a network of people together to try and figure out how to navigate this. And in the meantime, we're going on missions every single week that they have to complete and succeed at and survive and do well. So it's kind of like this heat's coming at them from every angle at all times, and everything's still, life moves forward as fast as the military makes it, while she's trying to keep up and navigate this dynamic. So yeah, that's what I'll stop there.
Cool. I have a few questions and ideas. I think my first I guess concern, I'll say, is the process of taking a very real and personal story that is happening to a lot of women, and perhaps men too. And a lot of those people, I shouldn't say a lot, some of those individuals have come out and told their stories, and there have been congressional hearings, and it's, of course, as you spoke to, very much a real issue that is coming to light, I think, in fairly recent time. So I think the question is telling a fictional version of the story versus potentially something that is true. How do you, kind of reconcile the fictitious approach?
I think it kind of I feel like it enlightens people in a way of the inner workings of how it happens, because like it's when you're watching it, like in the news, you get a boiled down version. It's this happened, they went to court,
Yes,
won and lost. And this
yeah,
kind of gives a microscope into the subtleties of it all, because I've always heard about harassment and how a studio will try and bring someone down, but until it happened to me, and it went on for like a year and a half, it was like nonstop, and I only stayed at the job because it was during the economy crash and there was nowhere else to go.
yeah.
So I had to stay. Like I even had to get a civil rights attorney. I mean, it was.
I'm very sorry that you had to go through that. And I think that that's the point for a lot of people. It's not so easy as just quitting, because people have to pay the bills and people are put in these horrible spots. So I think it's a really important issue to shine a light on and to put a personal face on. So it's not just, cold hard facts that you might be reading in a report. How do you aim to kind of balance keeping it as accurate as possible so that it's kind of like respecting what's actually happening with then a story that feels, very, I think by nature, it's got to feel somewhat melodramatic. I mean, I think you could say that about Homeland. You have to have giant issues all the time. So I don't know, how do we balance something that's totally real and totally personal to people with these something that's kind of somewhat, military fiction.
Well, I think also to give it some breathing room of like like, there's high energy in the missions, and that could be where more the scripted part is. And then there's enough stories that I could be reading from real life and make the breathing room part be slower and more accurate and closer to real life in the harassment thread. If you're balancing, like, some scenes are set with them doing their mission, but then come back to the base and she's having to sit in an HR room. And I've read a lot of stories of how there's not HR in the military, but they're, in their rooms of like reporting. There's definitely transcripts of like real dialogues that have happened, and keeping that the true to life part, to respect that part. And I agree, it's important to respect that part immensely.
That makes sense. I think that having, perspective and perhaps there's a way to consult directly with people that have had these experiences. There was a show, another Netflix show, of course, called Unbelievable that I watched, the Caitlin Dever show, that I thought was really well done, and it wasn't always easy to watch, of course, but to me, it was a strong execution of an engaging story with a real character piece that felt honest and authentic and complex. And if I'm not mistaken, was based on a podcast or an article or something true. So I think my development suggestion would be to perhaps consider a way to bake in some sort of IP. I'm not saying that you should go and option a podcast or an article per se, but I think there might be a way in your pitch, and as you develop the show, of course, to have some sort of guiding light that might be based in truth. And that I think might be helpful, not just for the pitch and the commercial understanding, but also keeping that critical aspect of the story really grounded in truth as much as possible.
Right. Yeah. I talked a lot with Kirby Dick, who did the documentary Invisible War, which actually got Panetta to actually change some laws around the military. So that's where, like, I was really trying to pull real conversations of women and men talking about, like, how shocking it was is when they would actually say, I was literally raped like an hour ago, and they would say, I'm not sure what you want us to do about it. and the women were told to just go out and do their day's mission. I agree that the thread has to be very grounded in that aspect.
Cool. My other,
we are unfortunately almost done.
No worries. Thanks, Heather.
You have any last thoughts? Okay.
Sorry. Real quick.
Go for it.
I think one other question that maybe you've answered is how much of the story is going to take place in the military, so to speak? Do we get any glimpse at their civilian lives, or is it really solely focused on the areas that you mentioned?
Some of their personal lives as well. I mean, just a little bit, so it doesn't take over, but I think we need some breathing room, like audience participation wise needs some air.
Cool. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Heather.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Cool. Up next, we have Renita. I think I have video. There you go, Renita. And there you go.
Can you hear me? Am I being heard?
Hey, Renita.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'll just get started. So my name is Renita. Sorry, my cat. My name is Renita. I'm a screenwriter for both film and television. My passion is both historical and present day character-driven dramas with a focus on those sort of seldom told, I like to call rarely revisited stories about marginalized communities. Today I'm telling you about my mini series almost like an anthology almost, that I originally started as a screenplay. And it came from me reading a book when I was in college. It was called The Incident at Bitter Creek, the story of the Rock Springs Chinese massacre. I remember reading the book thinking, I can't believe I never learned about this. Like, this actually happened in American history. Sorry, my cat. In American history. And so I read it, and I, some years later, I contacted the writer of it, and he gave me permission to write the screenplay. And so from there, I wrote a script, and I was told by a bunch of different people that it's just too long. You need to, this is so much story. You need to tell it as a television series so that you can flesh out the characters, because it's an entire world you've built here. And so I imagine it is like a historical drama, saga, mini series. The log line that I have for the series is, in the late 19th century American West, a ruthless coal industry pits white miners against Chinese immigrants who are searching for Shangri-La, but end up paying the ultimate price for the American promise. My first season is when two friends are essentially just escaping the rebellion that happened in Imperial China, and then journeying to America on the ship, on one of those big, large ships, hoping for the American dream, but sort of unprepared for the actual nightmare it turns out to be. So my story is one that's, again, it's a saga. It sort of traverses a big part of America as it was having a westward expansion. And so my story talks about, in the pilot itself, is pretty much the journey over here, while most of the story, about 97% of it, is actually happening on American soil. We have a slew of colorful characters we see throughout season 1 of this. Our protagonist, Lee, is like a proud Chinese laborer. So he's from the lower classes and from Imperial China, who is full of optimism about the potential, even too optimistic. And then he's a bit uneasy about the unknown. His young friend, G, is a young, impulsive, like former servant of the emperor. So he came from the upper classes, who was initially thrilled about his bond with Lee, but becomes disappointed because Lee sort of becomes greedy and outgrows their friendship. His wife, that is Lee's wife, Mei Ling, is on the trip with them. There's another pivotal character that came from the book named Mason Dowd, who is like a long-suffering, sort of unfortunate coalfield supervisor who's forced to be like to intercede in the battle between the white coal miners who keep striking for better working conditions and the corporate bigwigs who refuse to listen to them. And then his immediate supervisor is a guy named Jay Gould. I refer to him as ulcer-stricken, but also indifferent, who has no stomach at all for the grievances of the miners and doesn't care that they're suffering. In my pilot, in my sort of non-linear narrative, which it is, it begins with the trial. So we start off kind of right after the massacre happens. And that trial frames each episode, interjecting witness testimony, so you can kind of see where we're going, again, in non-linear story. Some of the themes is brutality, betrayal, all the while yearning for freedom. So at the very, very beginning of the story, when Lee, takes us back to Imperial China, he tells us about the Taiping Rebellion. We see very little of it, but we understand there was a big fight there. They got sort of ousted the emperor there, and him and G and his wife journeyed to America across the Pacific. But unbeknownst to them, in the Midwest, there's a storm brewing. The coal company bosses are going to use them as leverage to prevent the white miners from striking. And so they're ignoring their pleas, and they keep striking, and they become even more apathetic towards them. And so the unsuspecting Chinese are setting sail to this place with all this hope and dreams. And on their way here, something that sort of foreshadows that doom is that one of the Chinese workers, who's a crew member on the ship, goes overboard, and like nobody cares. None of the leaders on the board really. He's like, he just died. And so that's why the title of the pilot, I just put Man Overboard. This season, which is the focus is on this particular story about the Chinese, pretty much just talks about when they first arrive in America, and they are sort of recruited by a guy named Charlie Crocker, again, a real life person who recruited them to work in the Sierra Nevadas, his excavation company. And then they're sort of recruited after that to work in Wyoming, right as the white miners are getting more and more frustrated about their working conditions. And so we watch sort of these ineffectual town leaders and these greedy corporate bosses who act as catalysts to this massacre. As they continue to lose capital over the striking, they effectively give the Chinese workers the white miners' jobs, which you could imagine erupts into an American tragedy. So it sort of chronicles the side of American expansion westward the world is similar to something like Deadwood in terms of just the theme or the tone, but it's also reminiscent of like tragedy like the Oklahoma race massacre that no one just seems to know about. Not in that it's the same thing, but just in that it's a tragedy that no one seems to know, nobody seems to care about. And so my title for this story came from a quote from Craig Stourdy's book that says, even then, for a Chinese to immigrate to America, for a Chinese to immigrate anywhere, went against the very fiber of his being. Theirs was, after all, the celestial kingdom, the middle kingdom, halfway between earth and paradise.
Cool. Well, I think it's a very interesting piece of history that honestly I haven't heard of either. I think that we are starting to all see how the saying that the victors write the history books, and how much history is not told. And I know that there's also a ton of interest and attention in highlighting stories from the Asian and Asian American community. And it feels to me like something that audiences are really hungry for and interested in exploring. I tend to think of, comparative shows to figure out if it's carving its own lane. And I think that it's only really a cheap comparison to Warrior, the Cinemax or HBO Max show, which is set in San Francisco, and I think it's later and it's more action based. This really is a historical drama. To be honest, I feel that it's one of, if not the most challenging areas to develop. Traditionally, historical dramas are appealing to an older audience, and a lot of buyers are not that interested in that. Granted, rather than telling like yet another, Lewis and Clark type story, you're telling more of a lesser known piece of history that has more is more interesting from a 2021 lens than telling, a boring story that we already know about settlers, yada yada yada.
2 minutes.
My suggestion is to consider not making it a limited series, because I do understand it creatively, but I think is going to take a concept that is challenging commercially and back it even further into the corner by limiting buyers. Like, one of the most common mandates I hear in the marketplace is we do not want limited series or anthologies. Of course, there are still some made, and some of them are fantastic and very successful. But I think that fundamentally, it's a lot of work to develop a TV show, and people don't want to do it for 6 episodes if they could have an idea that could be evergreen. And it seems to me like there could be a longer version of the story. I don't know. Something to perhaps consider.
You said a longer version, like?
In other words, rather than pitching it as a limited series, like it has a finite 8-episode arc, you obviously know this far better than me, but maybe there's a way to not limit the story to 1 season. I mean, it obviously would be a champagne problem if there have been examples of shows, if I'm not mistaken, True Detective was not originally conceived to be multi-season, and people loved it so much they've made more, for better or worse. But yeah, to sum up my point, I think you may have more options in terms of development and who might be interested in making a show like this if it's not limited. So if there's a way, I don't think you necessarily need to have every single answer fleshed out over 5 seasons, but if you are open to a version that is not limited, I think it perhaps could be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I thought it was an anthology is because I have other stories that I was going to tell. Like every season would have been a different story.
I know,
so
but it's really, people don't want
but
that by and large. It could be a good idea, but I think it's more challenging from a marketing perspective and from a casting perspective. And again, I think it could be cool creatively, but I would consider not doing that.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate you choosing my script.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fascinating story. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Renita. All right, cool. Just to keep things moving, we have Mark up next. I think I have to invite you on.
Hey, Mark.
Hello there. How are you, Jay?
I'm good. But let me find your screen. I don't seem to
Let
see
me
you.
get his screen started. There we go.
When I was looking you up, Jay, I was glad to see you weren't the Fox News sports commentator. I was like, that would be interesting.
Thank God I am not. Yes.
Hey, Mark, I asked to start your video as well, if you want to start that.
Oh, sure. Sure.
I had my IMDb page merged with the other Jay Glazer a number of years ago, and I was getting phone calls for him.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. You see me now?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Hey.
Hi, Mark. I'm a screenwriter based in Denver and Palm Springs, and I'm going to just jump right into my pitch because it's detailed. So I'm going to ask you to picture your closest friends, recall the interaction, the joys, struggles, and sorrows you've shared throughout the years, the unbreakable bonds. Now, imagine them suffering inexplicable pain. Picture them in their final moments. Imagine half of those friends suddenly removed from your life. Visualize your world without them, the huge void. It's a terrible thought, almost unbearable. For me, merely remembering the names of those I've lost to AIDS is not enough. My desire is to honor my teachers, friends, and partners who did not survive, to ensure their battles and legacies are not forgotten. And like HBO's It's a Sin or Pose on FX, my series Life During Wartime illuminates the lives of individuals fighting for survival with dignity against all odds in a time of fear and darkness. Life During Wartime is a 1-hour drama set in late 80s Reagan America, when the moral majority was forcing its conservative agenda on the masses, and when homophobia and the stigmatization of those afflicted with HIV and AIDS rampaged. We open on a stormy California beach. Alone, battered by rain, a young man in his late 20s stares at the churning ocean, a voice resonating in his head. I'm sorry to tell you, but your test came back positive. This is Patrick Puck Dunn, a recovering alcoholic actor newly diagnosed with HIV. He's quick-witted, angry, and combative. Life has not been easy for him. He's had an abusive childhood. He's lived on the streets in his teens, but he doesn't want pity. He wants his one chance at life. And although he sees the devastation the AIDS crisis is inflicting on his community and everyone around him, remaining in denial is his sole means of survival. One day on a film set, Puck's accused of having AIDS and gets fired from his first big acting job. Irate, he retaliates by hurling a cup of urine at the homophobic director, which ends his acting career and sends him on an all-night bender. Falling off the wagon after 3 months of sobriety is the least of his problems when his fed-up ex, Scotty, kicks him out. Humiliated, he flees to the last place on earth left for him, his estranged mother's trailer park in Palm Springs. There he finds his mother, Gwen, has suffered a stroke and is being tended to by a take no BS live-in caregiver, Kingston. Puck's surprise arrival disrupts their tranquil lives. Not to mention the rocky initial encounter with Lucinda, the tyrannical, Reagan idolizing HOA president, where Puck hurls insults and thrusts a middle finger in her direction, making friends and influencing people is not his strong suit. Navigating this environment, Puck struggles to adapt to his new world, and being called in front of the HOA board for mooning a gaggle of nosy ladies doesn't help. Puck finds a sympathetic ear one night when he meets Charlotte, a 93-year-old forgotten silent film star and neighborhood pothead. Charlotte extols her unique brand of wisdom while doling out incredibly potent joints. In fact, the entire community is inhabited by a group of colorful D-list Hollywood has-beens from the golden age of cinema, whiling away their twilight years in oblivion. Told through episodic vignettes, we get to know the remarkable trailer park inhabitants like Puck's mother, and Esther Williams stand-in and Bathing Beauty extra, Alvin, a former vaudeville hoofer, and his dancing dog Rocket, Betty, a faded starlet whose career was ruined because of a botched studio-arranged abortion, Eiko, a Japanese-American actress whose career ended due to her internment during World War II, Irving and Shirley, a glitzy married couple who waltzed their way through MGM musicals, never making the big time, and Lucinda, our antagonist, an Ida Lupino type whose aspiration to direct was quashed in the patriarchal world of old Hollywood, leaving her dejected and bitter. From the vast cast of characters, Puck forms alliances, makes enemies during his journey to healing, discovering the seniors all have something valuable to teach him, and through their interaction, propel him forward. Our season finds Puck struggling with sobriety and fighting HIV while avoiding ending up on the street. His ongoing conflict with Kingston, dealing with his mother's depression, deteriorating condition and death, and warring with Lucinda takes Puck from a downward spiral of selfish desperation to a place of hope. As the series progresses, Puck overcomes his addiction, finds his life purpose, forms a true community from the elderly misfits, and makes himself a vital and positive force in his community. This is my generation's defining story, one begging to be told. The AIDS epidemic forever changed us, leaving us wake a community forever transformed. And despite the catastrophic loss, a message of hope, love, and compassion endures. This is a demonized community. This is a story of a demonized community rising up as one, elevating those whose voices were marginalized or tragically silenced. Life during wartime is a survivor's tale. Thanks.
Cool. I think it's a really unique and clearly personal story. And honestly, as soon as you opened up, it immediately brought to mind a close friend of mine that I lost. And I think for a lot of people, whether they have lost a friend or family member to AIDS or something else, there's something that, of course, is very relatable. It's a part of the human condition. And I think the question for any period story should perhaps be, why are we looking at this today, and what does it mean, and what can we learn from it or re-examine some part of our history, not unlike the previous pitch. And for me personally, I was born in the late 80s, and I really truthfully didn't know some of the details, like particularly of Reagan era policy. I just listened to the Adam McKay podcast called Death on the Wing that examines like the intersection of culture and politics and sports, obviously slightly different than your story, but I really didn't know all of the nuances and details of Reagan era policies. And they do talk about AIDS and drugs and all sorts of things. So I think that I'm not alone, and there are a lot of people that are learning sometimes it takes, of course, some distance from a period of time. And we obviously have been 30 or 40 years from the 80s, which we, I think, most closely associate with the AIDS epidemic. So anyway, that's all to say that I do think it's interesting, how you're choosing to present the story in this trailer park centered around this group of characters. I am curious about tone, and are there comedic elements, or is this a story that you're telling, in a pretty straight, dramatic way?
Well, I think that some of the characters, especially the trailer park inhabitants, I think they will add a lighter element to the. So I don't want it to be this big downer,
Yeah.
This guy needs to turn his life around, yes, and he does. And I think that he starts finding ways to interact with them, and things become uplifted, becomes much more positive, and really showing how a community can really rise together and work with each other and help each other. And I think that's what you're hinting at too, about going back and looking at something in the past. I'm thinking about our last year with us all experiencing a pandemic, and how in so many ways it did tear families apart. It tore, our country apart in a way. And I think it's interesting to kind of view it from that aspect as well, that where it's all about trying to find ways for people to look beyond their differences and work together. And hopefully that's the biggest message. And I know what you're talking about tone. I think that
2 minutes.
I think that with Puck being, with an actor and having that connection to Hollywood and all these other people too, I think it'd be really fun to just see ways that he interacts with these seniors, and and they both add positive elements to each other's lives.
This certainly feels like it's in the cable and streaming space. I'm curious if there's a particular network that you think is the most right for your show.
I look at what's been produced already. Like FX has a lot of series that have kind of dealt with, especially through Ryan Murphy, and then HBO's had It's a Sin. But I think, Hulu would be a great place because I think they're not afraid to really putting some pretty edgy stuff out there. And granted, this is not typically or terribly edgy, but I think there can be elements there that, that especially dealing with politics and, dealing with AIDS and, and some of the grimmer sides of that definitely don't belong on network for sure.
Yeah, I think Hulu is a good idea. Showtime also they did, if I'm not mistaken, Queer as Folk and now the L Word. So I think clearly they embrace some of this material. Hulu, I think, is a really good idea. Part of how they distinguish themselves from the other streamers is by deliberately doing progressive, kind of challenging and political stuff. So I agree. That's probably the best fit. This might sound like an obvious idea, but I think a big asset could be, you mentioned Ryan Murphy. I mean, who wouldn't want to work with Ryan Murphy? But there are so many prominent showrunners, filmmakers from the LGBTQ community, and there's such a boost of support for helping to tell these stories. Right. So I think it could be open to collaborating with anyone, but I think that there's a lot of great collaborators out there that might be able to even bring something of themselves to this story as well. So it feels like you're on the right path. Yeah. Any questions for me?
No, I think that's it. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Jay, that is about halfway done. If you need to take a little water break, whatever you need.
I am going to take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Cool. We'll be here.
All right. Thanks.
And FYI, Brent, you are up next. The rest of the order, if anyone's listening, it's Brent, and then we have Bridget, Shri, and Alfonso. Cool. All right, Jay.
So someone just asked if I've read the pitches, and I have.
Cool. Yes. Great. To continue on, we have Brent. Brent.
All right. Okay. Now I can.
Hey,
I
Brent.
need to start my video.
We
Hey.
can hear you, but we can't see you.
Yeah. When I go to start my video, it says
Let me
the
see
host
what
has
I can-
stopped it.
Let me see what I can do.
Uh-oh.
Ask to start video. Go ahead and start. That should
There you
work.
go.
Cool. Take it away.
Someday we'll get Zoom figured out.
Hey, Brent.
Hi, Jay.
How you
Hey,
doing?
so my name is good. My name is Brent. I was chosen to talk to you about my feature, Ghost Box: A Love Story. My background is I've kind of done a little bit of everything. I was an architectural draftsman in high school and made movies, and then went to architecture school and failed miserably, went back home, worked in nightclubs, putting up nightclub shows around town with multimedia events and DJs, and then went to film school, got into cinematography and production, worked in production for a long time here, did some assistant directing work, things like that.
Where do you live? Where's here?
Los Angeles.
Oh, cool.
But then, as I was working, I was standing in the rain at 2 a.m., I was looking at the writers who weren't there, who would just show up at Video Village. I was like, huh. So started talking with them, started writing alternate scenes to some of the horrible network stuff that I was being filmed. Was fortunate enough to become a script coordinator on a couple drama series. Unfortunately, it only went for one season. So I ended up writing first episode, second season, sort of just to, answer questions that were never going to be answered because the shows got canceled. So just started, really getting into the writing.
I can't say that I'm a big fan of, predictable network shows either. What sort of stuff do you like? What's your taste?
Well, first season, True Detective, because I like things that, the cool thing about a genre is that it answers a lot of questions, but then you can do cool things within it if you sort of, pay attention to the markers.
Totally.
But most recently, kind of gravitating more toward, Palm Springs and Swiss Army Man and, Safety Not Guaranteed and things like that.
Very like
some odd
meshing genres and experimental type stuff.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I grew up in Phoenix, but my first exposure to art and all that stuff were foreign films. So I got into film through foreign films and then discovered American cinema. So, but I've discovered, like watching the new Master of None, I'm like, I need something to happen.
I am 2 episodes in, and it's a little like watching paint dry. Yeah,
and I'm like, okay, cool. But Kajillionaire, I just watched. That was amazing. I forget her name. It's spaced on her name, but it's very.
Sorry to sidetrack us, but maybe it's just me. But these shots in Masters of None, where they're deliberately holding a shot on nothing happening for.
They're beautiful.
Yes, but something's got to move here. I'm gonna fall asleep.
Yeah, they're beautiful shots, but it's like. So yeah, that's the thing that working in television really drilled in is like, you start constructing stories and you have act outs and some are emotional, some are plot and you try and get little moments in. So now I'm moving over to writing features, bringing in both the character, like my stuff is tend to be character forward dramedies, I guess. But anyway, so that's what I'm going to talk about today is one of them. This is Ghost Box: A Love Story. So in a sleepy New England town, people from the city have been coming in and rehabbing the old Victorian houses, gentrifying them. But when they find out that the history of the town goes back to the Salem witch trials and things are starting to go bump in the night, they call the local witch hunter Arnie. Now, Arnie has a pretty good track record for clearing houses of evil spirits and making these things go away and making happy homes for a price, even though he's in his early 20s. But he's actually scamming these newcomers because he has his friend goes in and haunts, and then Arnie is called in as a cavalry, and he gets makes enough money to keep himself in weed and spicy ranch Doritos. But the thing is Arnie's friend in the scam, Caleb, died when they were both 17. So Caleb's a ghost, and Arnie's coming up to 25 years old. And he's wondering if there might be a little bit more to life than just, getting high and fucking around. Arnie's doing really well in his community college electronics class, so much so that the instructor's saying he should enter this contest, and if you win, you get a job at a big tech firm, which would be a really big fucking deal. So Arnie goes to the only place where he can kind of think, where ghosts don't bother him, which is at the old graveyard, because ghosts only hang out where they used to hang out when they're alive, and nobody hangs out in a graveyard when they're dead or when they're alive. So he meets a girl there who is from one of the founding families of the town. She's returned to do her dissertation on the history of the town, and they hit it off. And so here's another opportunity to grow and to maybe do something more. So he spends less time doing the scams, more times with Tessa and working on the project for the contest. And his friend Caleb is getting kind of pissed. He's like, "Why are you fucking with a good thing? We can be 17 forever, and just why get a job and why go without that? We can just keep having fun." So Arnie has to kind of make a decision. But Tessa finds out about his scams and, breaks it off. His friend Caleb has disappeared, and the instructor who he thought was his ally actually stole his prize-winning work as his own to get the hell out of that community college and go get a real job. So Arnie's left with nothing. So but he gets a call from Tessa, and she's pissed. She says, "Hey, you're pulling one of your scams on my own folks. What the hell are you doing?" So Arnie knows it's Caleb fucking with Tessa because he's jealous. So he goes with his ghost box, which he's invented, which is kind of like an old-timey radio with glowing tubes, but it also has digital displays and stereo speakers, and he can communicate with the dead through this device. Takes it to Tessa's parents' house. Turns out it's not Caleb, it's Tessa's ancestors, who were not only the founding family of the town, but they were the original witch burners. And they think Tessa, because she's kind of dresses like a goth, is a witch. And Arnie's activities have given rise to them being able to come back and haunt things and make things right. So Arnie has to make sure his ghost box thing really works for real this time. And with the help of Caleb, with the help of Tessa, saves the day. And he convinces Caleb to accept the truth, go into the light, and move on with your life. Now, the thing is that Caleb has been resisting going into the light because his father is a fire and brimstone kind of preacher. And Caleb isn't sure if he's going to go to hell or heaven. So he would rather play it safe and just sort of stay in limbo, because Caleb has feelings for Arnie. So there's little bit of a love triangle going on there. So at the end, they all have to move on, decide to move on with their lives. Tessa, she thought that she was the hot shit from the top level social family in town, but they're actually a bunch of assholes. Arnie has to move on. Caleb goes into the light. They all have to kind of like really move on, accept their past, move on.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Cool. In reading your pitch and hearing you explain a bit further, would it be fair to say that this is a story that's primarily for like a Goosebumps type audience, like maybe teen and preteen, or like late kids, or is it more mature?
It's a little older than that, because it's one of those periods of time when, like in your early 20s, where there's a time when I was in my early 20s, and I was outside a bar with a beer, and this cop came up and was going to give me a ticket for drinking in public, and I was like, oh. And for some reason it triggered in me like, hey, I'm at the age where I could go to jail. Like I could be arrested, and I could, these adult things could start to happen to me, and I can't get out of that. So what do? It was like one of those, and there's many of them, all through life. This just happens to be sort of like a main one for Arnie. So it's a little older, his friend's 17, he's 25.
Yeah.
So.
That makes me wonder about tone. Like would you like categorize this as YA, like maybe to ask in a slightly different way, if we're targeting not just teens, but also somewhat older young adults, like, are we seeing this as a commercial kind of, Riverdale-esque piece, or are you going for something that is more like the stuff that you mentioned earlier, the Swiss Army Man and these kind of weird independent films?
I guess a Riverdale meets To All the Boys I've Loved Before, like
Okay.
kind of a not the darkness of Riverdale, but the emotional weight of it,
Yeah.
with the lightness and fun and quirkiness of a younger sort of piece. So that sort of like between the two.
So we're staying away from, how do I put this? This isn't a dark exploration of death.
No.
Okay.
No. In fact, like the ghost death part of it is almost secondary to their relationship. Secondary to what they're going through as a relationship. It's almost like one person is going to go away to college and their best friend's staying behind.
Yeah.
Those sorts of situations. So it's a situation that I think a lot of people can relate to in the sense of that part of life happening, whether it's a ghost or.
I think I'm trying to think about, yes, how to position it. So I think it feels to me like a more of a not that it's a $50 million film, obviously it's not, but it's not, $1.5 million film either. So
Yeah.
I think that
Like Palm Springs.
Well, I think that was like a, $6 to $8 million indie. But I think the pieces for me that are maybe not matching up a little bit is I think I'm struggling to understand like what space it is sitting in. It is in Palm Springs. That's more of an adult movie, and it's older. Yeah, it's older skewing, and the tone is a lot more cynical, I think. So if this is All the Boys or whatever the hell that thing is, I'm thinking about how to position it, because we don't have a beloved best-selling book here, The Notebook, whatever it may be. So right. I'm not saying that it.
Well, I was thinking it would be. Yeah, I was thinking it would be like, get some sort of younger version of Bo Burnham. Somebody who is a comedian or has some sort of, is adjacent, but this would be a position, where that actor could really,
yeah.
dig in and have fun with it and things like that.
Yeah,
we do have to wrap it up, guys, in a minute.
Okay. All good. Thanks, Brent.
Oh. Right, thanks, Brett.
Sorry, I think I'll just to finish up that last thought. I think it's worth perhaps some further investigation about how to position it. I think there's an answer, but I think I'm struggling a little bit to place it into like a development pipeline, for lack of a better word.
Right, it's positioning something that's character forward dramedy.
Yeah, but it doesn't have, the famous books of the YA thing. So I think there perhaps is a different combination of taking the Swiss Army Man thing with something that's more mainstream. I think there's an answer, but I'm not sure that we've hit it yet.
Fair enough.
Cool. Thanks, Brent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. And up next, we have Bridget.
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Perfect. Hey, Bridget.
I am just going to
yes, we got you.
My view here, speaker view.
Yeah.
How are you?
Great. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Happy to be kind of on the end of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's nice. We can leave the house again. I might just do it later.
I'm going to a dinner party.
Me too. How exciting.
I know. Wow. So I guess a little about me. I'm a feature writer. I started about 10 years ago, learning the craft and putting in my hours and classes and reading scripts and writing scripts and just trying to kind of find my voice. And classes like Roadmap have been really amazing. I've gotten to a point now where I have a body of work and I I definitely live in the feature space in either small indie dramas like Turning Point, the one I sent, or big budget female-led action. And those are kind of my lanes. I don't aspire to be in a writer's room or produce or direct. You know, in my perfect world would be finding a producer for my projects.
I am curious if in like that second category of like bigger female-led action stuff, is there a film that you've seen recently that you might recommend?
You know, I really liked the new one with Charlize Theron, even though I don't write similar to her, The Old Guard.
Oh, you know, I watched that. That was good.
Yeah, that's not exactly how I write, but I really liked it. And I loved the use of the female, the grouping and the minority character. And just there's
The
a lot.
actresses were fantastic. Very good acting.
Yeah, so I would say that's probably my go-to one.
Cool.
Yeah, so then I feel like I'm at a point where I was invited to the Athena Lab. So I feel like I don't suck at this point. So roadmap is like, okay, now you need to learn how to pitch.
Congratulations. But no, but to speak to that point for a second, I honestly think that the ability to pitch and connect with people is equally important to how well you can write. Truly. Like I have seen it go both ways when people are so brilliant on the page, but struggle to connect with people, and people that maybe are not so brilliant that manage to have huge success through people liking them and wanting to work with them.
And like, you know, I don't live in LA. I joke, I have a long-standing critique group that outlasted my first marriage. Like that's how long we've been together. But yeah, but everything I write has a basis of something that happened to me in my past. So like with Turning Point, you know, that's a really sad story for me that my parents went out of town, no boys, no parties. And the first thing I did was bring the boyfriend over, and then he just choked. And I lived with that guilt. Like if I hadn't had him over, would he be alive? If I hadn't broken the rules. And I think in today's environment, there really isn't a story like this that addresses using art to heal grief. I mean, in some ways, The Sound of Metal maybe, but you know, I feel like in today's world, like people are grieving. The kids that missed their prom, they missed their parties, they missed all of these lives, you know, these milestones. And I'm not an opponent of chemical intervention for, you know, to get over grief, but I feel like if you could, you know, I'm not saying over medicate to people kind of tell you to just get over the grief and in any way that is, but I think numbing behaviors are a lot more common, and art is important. It shouldn't be an extra. It should be a tool and a way to get through things. So that's kind of, am I talking too much? That's kind of
I agree with you. I think that, you know, the old cliche that if you live a boring life, you'll have nothing to write about. And I think some of the most powerful art comes out of people processing whatever they're going through. So I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And I really believe that. And I think even in our school systems and other places, art is just, I mean, it's so fundamental to the human experience, and everyone's trying to, you know, budget cut it. It's just
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, my own personal connection, my mom and sister are both artists and have taught in school and out of school and done commissions. And my mom has a nonprofit that does arts and healthcare. And so it's using art as in part like a therapeutic tool for people that are ill or still emotionally affected by being ill.
right.
And it's proven that people that do art who are ill respond better to treatment.
Oh yeah, you know, writing this story, even though I was not a ballerina, I mean, a lot of it's fictionalized to make it more dynamic, but this has kind of healed me in terms of, I kind of had an epiphany. I wrote a lot of genre, and then I'm thinking, this is the story I've been hiding. I've been running away from writing my whole life. And now that I've gotten it out, I feel that it's been a breakthrough for me. So, I mean, I think you read this, the basic beats are, you know, we meet Kara, who's emotionally repressed, but she's got this goal. And then she experiences first love and a whole world opens up to her, and then it's snatched away. But part of the reason I selected Julie as a comp, and even though it's an older movie, is that it's really a lot about friendship and differences in friendship and how they can help you pull you through those tough times, the Mia Cara thing.
I have to admit, I don't know the movie, Julia. I'm sorry.
You probably weren't even born yet. It's a good one. I mean, Shirley MacLaine, and it's a really good one. And yeah, and actually there is a movie called The Turning Point, but it's so old.
That's also point as in the ballet term?
No, they don't have the E on the end. So I feel like, but I think it's so old that I wouldn't be accused of making a remake because it's not the same story.
No. That's generic enough or whatever. Yeah.
So, it's redemptive at the end where she really learns to use her art, and she comes to realize that if she hadn't experienced this love and this loss, she wouldn't have been equipped to raise her emotional performance to the level of her technique. So it's like that's the thing she had to experience to achieve her goal. So it has a little, I like to think it's heartbreaking and heartwarming because I like a happy ending. But I don't know. Tell me your suggestions after reading the pitch.
Bear with me a quick second while I gather my thoughts.
Sure. I'm so excited. I went to the movies last week and I saw A Quiet Place 2 in a real movie theater.
Was it good?
I think it's better than the first one.
That's definitely the type of movie that you probably want to see in theaters if you can with everyone else. Back to Turning Point.
Yes.
I think I like also, so like in thinking about development, clearly coming of age, female led. I think honestly that there are two potential different, I think that there is the, very small indie version of the story where, like, to me, there doesn't seem to be anything in the story that's so expansive and with a million locations. It feels like it's a fairly contained story that could be done on a low budget. I also think that there could be a bigger version that, is populated by well-known actors and hopefully not clumsily could be marketed more as, one of these To All the Boys I've Ever Loved and so on and so forth. So I think that there's a stronger market now for films like that. I think largely from the streamers who have really filled this niche of potentially mid-budget films that, without IP might be tough to launch theatrically without The Notebook and et cetera, et cetera. So, and some of these films are developed as negative pickups with Netflix where they give you some of the money and then some is raised independently and you have guaranteed distribution. So it feels like it's in that space. And I think that it certainly seems possible and, hopefully successful to think about, if possible, a proven director who has worked in this space before. I think it could be a filmmaker who's worked more in the independent space and could now be ready to tell a broader story. I don't think there has to be an absolute, but I think it makes sense perhaps to have a female filmmaker.
My dream director would be Eliza Hittman.
I'm sorry, I don't know Eliza Hittman. Give me one of her films.
She just did the one about, it was like a abortion story, and I'm blanking on the name of it.
Unpregnant? Is it Unpregnant?
No, it's not a comedy, but she won I think the Silver Bear at Cannes last year for it.
I see.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Oh, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
That was her film.
Yes.
Gotcha. I think that with a director that can attract talent it would be very achievable to get a popular young actress that wants to do something that is, character driven and might be different than, let's say, a popcorn TV show that she has done or something like that. That seems to be the play to me.
Great. Thank you so much. This is so.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for sharing your story.
Great. Thank you, Bridget. All right, up next we have Shri. Shri, you are up next. There you are. Just unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, Jay.
Shri, how are you?
I'm good. And to be honest with you, this is my first pitch.
Okay.
So this is the most memorable day for me.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, I would just add that if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
So just to give you a quick background of myself.
Please.
I'm like born and brought up in India. When I was 20, I moved to UK because I was offered an IT job. So, but my father is a dean and I have a habit of writing every day. So 2 things I do every day is like from when I was 9 years old, I started writing. So 2 things I do every day is mantra meditation. And the second one is I write something. It could be just a poem, a small short story, or it could be like something like so, but I take a paper and a pen, I write it in a book or a small note or something like that.
Can I ask, because I struggle with this myself, when you are doing meditation, are you able to really clear your mind and not have any thoughts come in?
I kind of, because I did it like when I'm tiny tweeny. So I started it like I believe my mother, when I started talking, I was very talkative, it seems. So my mother kind of wanted to channelize my energy with mantras. So she gave me like all those Indian mantras. So initially I started with like 1 row, 2 row mantras. Now I study like 1,000 verses mantras kind of.
Wow.
So it's like a small Sanskrit poems kind of thing, which could be. So to start with, sometimes you have to just start with something like which connects you the most, maybe nature, or that will be giving you that focus and then calms you kind of.
Okay.
So going there, so I suddenly in the pandemic, I was like going through all my notes and books and all. So I had completed like 2 full, 3 features and 2 TV pitches. And 1 TV pitch is almost 1,000 pages. And another TV pitch is like about, say, it's about a simple love story, like Pride and Prejudice kind of love story, where so that was also like, it came up to like 10 episodes. And then I have 3 complete movies. I was like, I thought, no, I should at least start trying pitching. So
right.
That's where I am here. And also I believe that media is the most powerful medium of the world as of now. So it should serve a purpose. Something like, not like a purpose means like changes lives or something, but purpose means it should give you a basic understanding of where you are going or like what you want from your own life. So, it should give that base kind of groundedness or keeping your head over your own shoulders kind of thing. So the whole thing is, you don't have to the entire movie to be a message, but there should be a small initiative for all those people. So what happened is, what made me write my story, Miss Megastar, is Malala. If you heard of, like, she's
I sure have. Yeah,
she's an activist from Pakistan who was shot at a very early age of 14 years because she wanted the girls to be educated. So coming to LA or USA, we have blessed with so many opportunities, and everything we have everything is like at our, like, we switch on a light, electricity comes, we just open a tap, water comes down, and education is free. So everything is taken granted. So Miss Megastar is a story of a young girl whose mother is a supporting actress. So the movie starts itself at a place where it's like an aerial view of a LA, where a voice is narrating about the LA, and a young lady's voice is narrating about LA, and she says that my name is Megan, and I was involved in a lethal accident. So I'm talking from a limbo. So if I live, I have to, if I die, I might be going to the heaven. But if I live, I have to go back to the hell of the Hollywood. So this is Megan, and my name is Megan, and this is my story. So this is the opening of the movie. So the story is Megan in limbo recaps her story. So when she's a baby, how she met her nanny and the driver. And then the recap is about like quick montage kind of thing, where she meets with her friend, Joey Parsons, who is a gay, because of who he was like abused in the school. So she and he becomes friends because he's a designer. He designs dresses for the girls. So at 9 years old, she meets with a Joey Parsons, who becomes later her manager. And then on her 16th birthday, they hire like a Jamaican photographer who takes beautiful pictures of her. So meanwhile, her mother gets her some child roles, and then she is mentored by a director, producer. His name is Michael, and he kind of mentors her, and then gradually she becomes like a popular actress. So at the 16th birthday, Michael gives her a Ella role in Cinderella latest version. So that's how she becomes popular. But sometimes at the youth, if somebody is like, you want approval from somebody, you are admiring somebody, and somebody is like the primary position, means like she's without a father. Her mother is like as I told you, like a supporting actress. So she takes Michael as like, she really admires Michael because he's a big producer and very, very, very top director. So she falls in love with him. But Michael takes advantage of it, and she becomes like a mistress for him. So at one point, at one point she's popular. Within 20 years, she becomes the most popular actress. Like a decade of, she's voted the decade's most popular on the media. So at that point of time, a Mexican Don invites her to his son's daughter's marriage. So she goes there, like few of the Hollywood top directors and producers, actresses goes there. So there, her mother finds out that she has a relationship with Michael. Her mother's name is Margaret. When they come back home, there is like a big fight between the mother and the daughter. At that point, the mother reveals that he's your paternal father. He's your biological father. So you are a mistress of your biological father. So at that point, out of, sometimes kids of that age, 19, 18, 20 years age, they're so impulsive, they react. She slaps her mother. Next day morning, when she goes back to say sorry to her mother, she finds her dead. So,
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Yeah, so she's spotted. So entire thing is, then after that, she confronts with Michael, and then same night she ends up in a big accident. So, which is like she could not get up for 2 years, and then at that point, like the 4 pillars of the life comes into play. So if anything, till then, she had like a mother who is taking care of her career and everything. Now she does not, she has to have financial stability. Physically, she has to be back rolling, and, emotionally, she has to have support, and socially, she has to find a support. So all her friends comes into the picture, and 2 new characters comes into picture. One is like a psychotherapist from India. Her name is Maya. And another person is like a chiropractor from China, who is very happy person, and who is she's like very different for a culture person.
Shri, I am going to jump in because I can tell by pacing that we're going to run out of time, and I want to be able to give you some feedback. Is that okay?
Please, yeah.
And I have your outline as well. I think it's a really interesting story, and I think, you know, cross-cultural stories are always interesting as well. I think that projects that are about the industry, that are about an actor, I think are often more challenging. Doesn't mean it can't be done or it shouldn't be done, obviously. But I think that the big question to ask is, for the average viewer who doesn't know anything about show business and may not be connected to that world, how can we connect with this, and how can we relate ourselves to this character, even though she's a, you know, famous actress? And, you know, I think what you're doing, we have this archetype of someone who is on the rise and kind of gets knocked down and has to rebuild themselves in some hopefully better version, right? I think what often can make these stories work the best, and, you know, to pull one out of a hat, Star is Born, the most recent one, obviously, I think did a really great job of taking this larger than life character and kind of grounding it in reality. And I think the key is finding a perspective, whether it's someone around them, that can be the audience's eyes into the story, so that, you know, so we don't have to say, oh, you know, this is an entitled actor. This is sometimes how people think. Why should I care about their struggles? And I think that we're all human beings, obviously. So whether you're a famous actor or someone who, whatever, is a family person working a job, we're all human beings. And so I think it's about finding the universality of the character, while also finding a perspective that can feel a little more like the common man or the common woman.
Great. That is it for time.
Thanks so much, Sheree. I think for a first pitch, I thought you did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Great job, Sheree. Awesome. And then lastly, but not least, we have Alfonso. Take it away.
Hey, Alfonso.
Well, how you guys doing?
Great. How about yourself?
Good. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
All right. So I'm going to jump in. So
Please.
my name is obviously Alfonso Garcia. I'm a writer. I'm focused on screenplays. However, I have gone into novels and published a self-independent novel. My experience is in writing is mostly self-taught, but I've been doing it now 6 years. And I've taken classes like these, like the ones offered on Roadmap, to really help me like develop throughout the years. So jumping into my pitch, the title of the screenplay is called The Holy Spirit, and it's a unique plot. It takes place in New York, 1920s, which was a time of excitement and breakthrough. It was a time of new ideas that were embraced and became mainstream. Names like Edgar Cayce and Blavatsky, all these spiritualists, all these mediums that were introducing hypnosis, channeling into mainstream, it became kind of exciting, and it became kind of like widely spread in the news. But it launched something called the spiritualist movement at the time, which grew rapidly, not only in New York but across the states. As it started growing into the hundreds of thousands of people, it was mostly because of the youth and the rebellion that was taking place at the time, you know, the time to just be alive. I think local government leaders became concerned. They became concerned that they were losing control over the majority's youth. Until an opportunity arose where one of the high pastors of one of the most prominent congregations in New York proposed to the order to this group of men that control this local government and other local governments across the country. He proposed we ban the movement. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to pass a bill that bans witchcraft, that bans spiritualism, mediumship, hypnosis, transcommunication with the afterlife. And the way we're going to begin this is we're going to hire an investigator to debunk the movement. So the opportunity is presented, and moving forward, the investigators brought to New York from Louisiana. He's a Louisiana native. Him and his apprentice show up in New York, and he's picked up by the order's goons, I want to call the people that are tasked out to take him, to chaperone him, take him where he needs to go, and introduce him to the people he needs to meet and report back to. But what they're actually doing is monitoring him. They're keeping tabs on him. And with regards to the investigator, his name is Pierre Monnier. And he's actually a very disturbed, critical, but he's an intelligent investigator. And he also happens to be a functioning alcoholic. So he's a loose cannon. But this is what kind of propels him forward and really disrupt what he's pursuing. He grew a reputation for doing this back in New Orleans, just ridiculing mediums and people that were hosting seances. So the goons are chaperoning him. They take him back to meet the secretary of the order, who he's supposed to report back to and take care of the logistics. Then he's taken to see this high pastor, who expresses his concerns, and he also introduces him to his daughter Guinevere, who is essentially the organizer and prominent figure of his congregation. She finds the investigator unwelcoming, and she's honestly discontent by his presence because she senses like darkness in him. And the investigator's investigation begins with challenging sidekicks, gathering information, criticizing leaders of the movement while harassing smaller psychic shops. And so he's going around, he's gaining traction in his work, and the local media is loving it. They're publishing all of this as it goes, while smearing the credibility of mediumship, of spiritualism. However, during one of his leads, he arrives in one of the local chapters of mediumship. And there he discovers that one of the members is actually the high pastor's daughter, Guinevere, who's secretly practicing mediumship. So now Monnier is intrigued by this. He's intrigued with Guinevere, and he wants answers from her. So he begins to show back up at the church unexpectedly to try and speak with her. But he finds himself at odds with the pastor, because the pastor's finding it really suspicious. Why is this man continuously showing up? So he begins to just flat out let him know, you're not welcome here anymore. Stop showing up here. However, the pastor's kind of privy. He's kind of aware that his daughter continues disappearing during very important times, that she's not as involved with the church anymore. So he's kind of at odds with her too. He wants to know more. He may suspect that she's part of something else now, that she's part of a different group now. And he's just finding this unacceptable. And he's very I guess, jaded by this. So now Guinevere is kind of more involved with the spiritualist movement. She's involved with her chapter more, and they encourage her to start rising up as a leader of the movement. Excuse me, I'm keeping track of time as well.
Now, if I could just jump in for a second, just so
sure.
It feels like you were describing all of the story beats to me, and I obviously get that, but I would love to hear more about kind of like your bigger vision for the film and what you really hope to say with it. I have the outline here, so I have a pretty good grip on the story, but I'd love to hear about what you're trying to say with this story.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm a practicing medium. I've been practicing since 2007, 2008, I've been practicing. I discovered something unusual in 2004 when I was in Fallujah, Iraq. and I was hit by a bomb. And this bomb kind of rung a bell in me, a very loud one, because it detonated maybe like 7-8 feet away from me. And people died and people were injured, people were evacuated. And in that moment, I had a supernatural experience where I saw my father who had passed away a year before that. And he walked with me like 7 or 8 feet and he grounded me. Then I was able to kind of get back in there and try to help and assist the situation as best as possible. So I took that away with me. I came home with that, trying to understand what the hell was I saw. My wife introduced me to John Edwards, and I started kind of just taking interest in this, trying to understand it more, tearing it apart. So I began to study it, practice it, and I became I became good at it. So I wanted to explain kind of the backstory and its origins in this movie, and just kind of take some criticism away and how it kind of conflicts with the church, but it's actually people's egos that's conflicting. It's not either power, if that makes sense. And that's the bigger personal story.
2 minutes. 2
Thank
minutes.
you for sharing that background. I am sure that you could craft a story solely around that if you were interested. I, as someone who quite honestly doesn't have a lot of knowledge about this sort of stuff, I'm like a little bit of a novice. I think about, some of the stereotypes that we might have. Like, of course, this is something that what little I do know, I probably know from movies or TV show, and it, probably, I don't know, isn't accurate, at least compared to your background and your connection. But I think another interesting contemporary look at this period of time, like, I think that throughout human history, we've always had believers and we've had skeptics, and that gray area in between those two realms, and also the power of the human mind and how much more there is than maybe we even can conceptualize in our conscious thought. And then on top of that, this concept of people that are fraudulent versus real, I think is something that is also so relevant today. When we think about political commentators or people that are contemporary mediums like yourself, obviously there's a whole spectrum of people out there. There are some that are making it up and are doing it maliciously. There are some that are making it up and are not doing it maliciously. And hopefully there are some like yourself that are the opposite of those two things. So I think it's an interesting contemporary look at it, but not that this is or should be overtly political, but we also have this concept of fake news and truth being relative. So I think that there's a lot of interesting contemporary ideas within this period story, which I assume was your intent. So that's cool.
Absolutely. I think all these dynamics, they play well against each other. And I'm not necessarily taking either side, I'm just playing them.
Yeah.
I think that's the theatrics I find, and that's the drama I'm bringing out in it, and that's what makes it interesting. The criticism, we welcome it. It's just part of the nature, I guess.
I am curious if in the way you're presenting what we're going to be seeing on screen, is it ambiguous, or are we drawing a conclusion that what we are seeing and what we're hearing is valid, or is it up to us to interpret what we are taking in?
So it is ambiguous, and I have to be clear on that, and it's up to every individual. Because I'm a novelist as well, I wrote this in a novel. It gave me the opportunity to just unload everything the way I wanted, just to say it and just expand on things. And I noticed two things. Some became super offended. Others were like, he understands this very clearly, and he's explained it to me for me to make a decisive decision, or just to become accepting of it and understand that my way is not the only way.
Yeah. I think that's a cool story. I don't know a ton about like this aspect of history. It sounds like this is something that you have learned quite a bit about.
I did a lot of research. Yeah, it took me about almost 2 years to write it, but a lot of that was research.
I think the interesting thing about, expanding a story in novel version is that you can build these characters that, yes, in a 90-minute or 2-hour movie, we can't put every element of the whole spectrum of these characters in here, but I think it's really useful often to do that because you wind up with characters that are incredibly rich and nuanced, and you figure out what you're pulling from these deep character studies
Right.
on screen.
Right.
We have to
Especially
wrap it
if I
up.
wanted to put
Last
this
thing.
in a cinematic format, I really
Totally.
had to shave off all the fat, and be more direct in the screenplay.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alfonso.
Thank you.
Great work.
Awesome. Thank you. Great, Jay. That was the last of it. If you just stay on with me for a minute, if everyone wants to jump on and say bye, Jay, if you have any last words of advice, go for it.
Just that I would say, thank you to everyone for bringing your stories to this little workshop. And it always is really fun and challenging, honestly, to get pulled in so many different story directions and ideas. It's a lot at once, but it was really interesting hearing everyone's point of views, and everything actually feels pretty firm in my mind. So it was great talking to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
everybody.
much, Jay. We
So
appreciate it.
much.
Thank you. Good luck, guys.
Thank you, writers.
Thank you so much.
Bye. A couple more people. Hi. Let's see. Let me. All right. It is just you and me, Jay. Let me stop recording.